Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. This is the second rest day of the 2022 Tour de France. Now I want to talk about the whole 9 stages here, so if you got some time, tune in. And I wanted to explain to you guys how important Rowan Dennis would have been here when we're talking about racing for the general classification for Jumbo-Visma. Remember, they have Jonas Vingegaard sitting second on the general classification at the Tour de France. And of course, they had Primož Roglič at the start of the Tour de France being one of their #1 hitters here for the general classification. Now, we'll break this down. I'll break this down here throughout the 9 stages, and hopefully you guys have some time. When we look at the individual time trial, Jonas Vingegaard did a solid job at the individual time trial of staying very close to Tadej Pogačar and only losing 8 seconds, along with his teammate Primož Roglič, who lost 1 second more at 9. Now, when we go into stage 2, and you're talking about a field sprint with Wout van Aert on Jumbo-Visma, you know Jumbo-Visma are going to use Christophe Laporte, and then they're going to use Wout van Aert in the sprint. If you had Rowan Dennis here instead of Wout van Aert, Jumbo-Visma wouldn't have to ride on stage 2 at all, except for trying to keep their GC guys out of the craziness throughout the sprint stages here at the Tour de France. Now, with Wout van Aert, he's racing for the green classification. He's going to win stages. He's going to want to put on a magnificent show here at the Tour de France, and he's going to cost energy all over the place for Jumbo-Visma when you're talking about racing for general classification. Now, if I'm Jumbo-Visma, do I bring Wout van Aert? Well, the problem is, if you don't bring him, you lose that insurance card, because nobody's been able to beat Tadej Pogačar throughout the last 2 Tour de France's. And Wout van Aert is that insurance card that if you can't win the general classification, then you can still possibly get yellow. You can win some stages along the way. And if you finish second on the general classification, you go back to your sponsors and you're like, we put on a show. We're second on the general classification on the podium at the Tour de France, possibly win the team classification, win multiple stages with Wout van Aert, and take a race leader's yellow jersey at some point in time during the Tour de France and green. So I understand all that when I'm sitting here talking about these 9 stages, but I want to just focus on the general classification battle and show you how badly it is affecting Jumbo-Visma. When we talk about stage 2, like I said, a lot of energy wasted for Wout van Aert. Then you come into the sprint when Fabio Jakobsen wins in fantastic style from 40 meters before the line, just blowing past everyone. This was a great win. But this is a big risk here for Wout van Aert. We know at any point in time when you're battling for a sprint finish at the Tour de France and you're coming to the line, things are going to get dicey and you can lose a rider, especially a sprinter, in these crazy sprints. We saw it last year on stage 3 when Caleb Ewan took himself out and Peter Sagan was gone for the whole Tour de France. So we know it's a fact that it's a big risk at the Tour de France to do these sprints. Wout van Aert does the sprint, comes up second. Now we go into stage 3. It's the exact same MO as stage 2, with Wout van Aert taking a big risk in the sprint. Only in stage 3, Wout van Aert went all the way to the right, taking everyone to the fencing. Now, at any point in time, he could have been disqualified and thrown out of the Tour de France. That leaves Jonas Vingegaard and Primož Roglič with one less rider here for Jumbo-Visma. And that's a high possibility. You're going, Chris, maybe they just relegate him to the back of the field. Maybe they do that. Maybe they let him get second on the stage. Maybe they throw him out like they did Peter Sagan when he tangled up with Mark Cavendish years ago here at the Tour de France. Okay, that didn't happen. We know that now. Now, when we get into stage 4, this is when things start really costing Jonas Vingegaard some time on the general classification. We have the last 900-meter climb with about 10 kilometers to go. That'll summit to the stage. Jumbo-Visma come into this stage. They know what they want to do. They want a repeat of stage 1 of Paris-Nice. They come into the final left. They start to climb, and they blow the field up. Now you look at the picture. It's Wout van Aert at the summit of this climb with 10 kilometers to go, and he's looking back, and he sees Jonas Vingegaard and Adam Yates back there. Now, at this point in time, he has some choices to make, and I talked about it already on a butterfly effect, but these choices could easily have cost Jonas Vingegaard time in the Tour de France against Tadej Pogačar had Wout van Aert dropped back, grabbed his teammate Jonas Vingegaard, Adam Yates. They went over the summit. They had about a 6-second gap on Tadej Pogačar. And let me remind you guys, throughout the 9 stages here of the Tour de France, Tadej Pogačar has never been dropped at the Tour de France with the exception of this stage 4. Now, do we know the outcome? I can't tell you 100%. But if we go over that climb with Wout van Aert, Jonas Vingegaard pulling 100%, then Adam Yates decides he wants to throw in and gain some time on the general classification riders because all of the other big GC favorites are dropped. Vlasov, Tadej Pogačar coming into this Tour de France as the big GC favorites over Adam Yates. Now they're dropped. He can go up there. You have 3 guys pulling through 100%. And if we look at the stage 4 at the bottom of that descent, it's Ineos up there pulling with Dylan van Baarle until Geraint Thomas pulls him off the front. So remember, that gap at 6 seconds at the top, whatever it was at the bottom of that climb, it's because Ineos is pulling, but had Adam Yates been up there with Wout van Aert, Ineos wouldn't have been pulling at all throughout the descent of this climb and part of the valley all the way to the finish. Conservatively, I'm thinking what Jonas Vingegaard could have gained at least 10-15 seconds on Tadej Pogačar on this stage 4, plus a time bonus, and that's being conservatively. Because in my professional opinion, I think these 3 riders would have stayed off. Tadej Pogačar would have been dropped on stage 4 and would have lost time. Now let me remind you, when we're here on the rest day of the 2022 Tour de France, neither Tadej Pogačar or Jonas Vingegaard have been able to drop each other throughout the first 9 stages of this Tour de France, barring the individual time trial on stage 1 and stage 4 here. Other than that, they've finished close enough to each other to not lose time on each other in terms of gaps, just time bonuses. Now, let's go into stage 5, the cobblestones, because this is when the Rowan Dennis show was really missed. Why they didn't bring him, I'm not certain, but Rowan Dennis is not here, and this would have been the day. He would have been spectacular for the GC guys here at Jumbo-Visma. Now, we see the crash with Wout van Aert. He's in the middle of the field, and at times during this cobblestone stage hanging out at the back. If you had Rowan Dennis here, Rowan Dennis would have been at the front of the peloton, and at no point in time would you have seen Rowan Dennis at the back of the peloton like we had witnessed with Wout van Aert. Wout van Aert, as he was trying to make his way back up to the front a little bit later in the stage, gets caught up when they go into that right turn and everybody crashes. At that point in time, I don't think Rowan Dennis would have been in this spot, and I don't think any of his teammates would have been. It's getting close to the crunch period here on stage 5. Rowan Dennis would have been at the front with his teammates Primoz Roglic and Jonas Vingegaard on his wheel, and probably would have missed that island in the middle on that right turn, and nobody would have crashed. Hypothetical, I know. But Wout van Aert's racing for the stage win. That's why you see him always out of position and trying to save energy by sitting at the back throughout this stage 5, and that's what causes the crash in that right turn. Rowan Dennis, you know, he would have been at the front 100%. Now we fast forward to Jonas Vingegaard having the bike problems with his bike changing off, and we'll see all his teammates running around doing musical bike chairs with their bikes changing back and forth. Jonas Vingegaard gets on his bike, starts accelerating. We see Wout van Aert come flying by Jonas Vingegaard and doesn't wait. We know from the picture that he saw Jonas Vingegaard when he looked right over his shoulder and seen Jonas Vingegaard changing bikes. At this point in time, though, you have to remember, Primoz Roglic is still in the front group. Wout van Aert is still thinking, hey, I want to win this stage. Okay, I crashed. I'm feeling okay. I'm coming back. I just passed Jonas Vingegaard. I don't need to wait for him because I've been given the green light from Jumbo-Visma to win this stage 5, so I'm going to keep going. Now, if we switch places, instead of Wout van Aert, we call him Rowan Dennis, most likely they go through all these cobblestone sections at the front of the peloton here with Rowan Dennis controlling, possibly even dominating the Tour de France field here on the cobblestones and keeping all his teammates out of trouble. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say Jonas Vingegaard still has a bike problem because anybody could. Rowan Dennis drops off immediately for his race leader and pulls him back onto the front group, goes to the front of the peloton, goes into the next cobblestone section on the front, wasting energy left and right. But guess what? Primoz Roglic is locked onto his wheel. Jonas Vingegaard is back in the peloton. And Primoz Roglic never goes through that roundabout and gets crashed because he's in a better position and would have seen that hay bale left out on the left side of the roundabout there that got pushed out in the road that caused the crash and dislocated his shoulder, then caused Primoz Roglic any chance here of winning the general classification without a Hail Mary that could come through here later in the later stages here at the Tour de France. Now, we get out of stage 5. We'll call stage 5 even on time. Even though we know Jonas Vingegaard lost time to Tadej Pogačar on this stage, now with Rowan Dennis there, he finishes with Tadej Pogačar. No time lost after stage 5. And we move on forward here in the Tour de France. Stage 6, Wout van Aert show here. He's trying to do something ridiculously amazing that's really rare here at the Tour de France. The racing was full gas. It was 220-kilometer stage. Wout van Aert is representing in every breakaway, even though he has teammates up there and he's wearing the race leader's yellow jersey. Eventually, he gets up the road in a three-man break that has no chance of making it once you have 4 teams back there chasing with 100 kilometers to go. Decides he's not going to abort, keeps pulling 100% fatigue in his legs. Now he blows up on stage 6, loses the race leader's yellow jersey that could have helped put pressure on Tadej Pogačar on later stages, on the mountain stages of Planche de Belfi here. Instead, with Wout van Aert blowing up, guess what? They open up the stage for a field sprint at the top of the final climb here. That's about 2 kilometers long. Tadej Pogačar wins his first stage here at the Tour de France, gains 10 seconds on Jonas Vingegaard. Those 10 seconds would not have been here on today's stage if Wout van Aert wasn't on this team and Rowan Dennis was. Because, remember, Wout van Aert doesn't do that ridiculous move, or let's say he doesn't do it, he wins the stage and takes the time bonuses, or the break stays off and the time bonuses are all gone. There's no way for Tadej Pogačar to gain 10 seconds on Jonas Vingegaard here on stage 6. Now we get into stage 7, Planche de Belfi, magical stage, magical climb, magical summit finish here. We see with 800 meters to go, Tadej Pogačar is putting on a show, blowing up the field. He's trying to win the stage, doing everything he can, and starting his attack from 800 meters out. Jonas Vingegaard, clearly on form, catches the Slovenian, but then jumps too early at 200 meters, dying just before the line, and Tadej Pogačar comes flying by him and doesn't even have to throw the bike to win the stage. That gains Tadej Pogačar 4 more seconds on the general classification because Jonas Vingegaard doesn't understand where his energy is going to fall off here on Planche de Belfi. With Tadej Pogačar already pulling from 800 meters, Jonas Vingegaard doesn't have to think about the stage win at this point in time. You've already won with Wout van Aert. You've already held the race leader's yellow jersey. If you just stay on the wheel of Tadej Pogačar, ride it all the way to 50 meters, 25 meters to go, throw in a big acceleration after Tadej Pogačar catches Lennart Kemna, you win the stage, you gain the time bonuses, and now we're talking about an 8-second swing instead of losing 4 seconds here on stage 7 of the Tour de France. Now we get into stage 8. This was another cluster again for Jumbo-Visma. They bully the field when we see that massive crash early in the stage. 3 riders are up the road. It's Fred Wright, Cattaneo up there, and Frederic Frison from Lotto Soudal. Those 3 riders are not going to stay off on a stage that's about 190 kilometers long with 2 teams interested in a field sprint. Now, Jumbo-Visma again mess up here. They cannot ride the front at all, make Tadej Pogačar, UAE team Emirates, ride the whole time. But guess what? They don't have Rowan Dennis here. They have Wout van Aert. Wout van Aert still wants to win. So we're 8 stages into the Tour de France. Wout van Aert's been in yellow. He's already won a stage, and now he wants another stage here at the Tour de France. They pull that group back. Now they're opening up everything for time bonuses. Wout van Aert does win the stage, but Tadej Pogačar gets third, gains 4 more seconds on Jonas Vingegaard. Now we go into yesterday's stage 9. This stage was the one stage I thought UAE Team Emirates absolutely messed up catastrophically on yesterday's stage 9. It's a long stage, difficult stage with 4 climbs. There's a big break of 21 riders up the road. Rigo Alberto Aran's up there. And UAE Team Emirates already have 2 riders out the back, Marc Soler and Mark Hirschi going out the back on the first KOM. You have 1 rider missing. Vegard dropped out because of COVID. And you have Brandon McNulty going up in a knucklehead move with Wout van Aert. Anybody that tells you it's easy in the front break, they're absolutely wrong. On a flat section when attacks are happening, you just follow a move and you can float up there, certainly you could be correct with that ideal. But it's stage by stage that you have to detail to figure out the analysis of it, to figure out how much power it takes to be in that break. And right now on the first KOM, 50 kilometers into this stage after it's been full gas, and you're covering a move with Wout van Aert pulling full gas uphill and Edvald Boasson from Total Energy selling out 100% for his teammate, I can guarantee you for this 8 kilometers, Brandon McNulty was not back there smoking a cigarette, having Cokes, and eating a Snickers. He was at the maximum red limit of the UAE Team Emirates rider's ability, and so when you get up to that front group, and you've gone over the first KOM here in stage 9 of the Tour de France, there's no way you can recover from that effort of following the wheel of Wout van Aert for 8 kilometers, 100% all-out effort. So when someone tells me, hey, it's a great idea of having Brandon McNulty in that front group, I'm telling you right now it's a terrible idea, and I'll back it up with the last KOM. When we go up the last KOM, up front, Bob Jungels is throwing down a massive move. He's still solo up the road. Brandon McNulty cannot get up to him, which means he doesn't have good form, and he cannot stay with the attacks from Ineos and from FDJ's Thibaut Pinot. Big acceleration. That sends Brandon McNulty out of the break and back to the GC field. Now, you know at that point in time, he was maxed out. If he can't stay with Bob Jungels, if he can't stay with Castroviejo, Carlos Verona, and he can't stay with Thibaut Pinot, clearly Brandon McNulty was doing 100%. Rightfully so. I'm not telling you he should have been able to stay with that. I'm just stating the facts that when you follow Wout van Aert across, when you've been looking after Tadej Pogacar for 8 stages already, you could be fatigued. So we go all the way back to when Tadej Pogacar put his team on the front, chasing like crazy. They grabbed these 21 riders up the road. At this point in time, it's an absolute knucklehead move because Vegaard's not in the race for you. The 2 marks are already off the back with Mark Hirschi and Marc Soler, and Brandon McNulty's wasted his form going up following Wout van Aert. That's 4 out of 8 riders. You got half a team left. That means you're going to have to ride a bunch of guys 100% hard if you want to win this stage. And why? You already got 2 stage wins here and you're wearing the race leader's yellow jersey. Don't worry about the stage if you want to keep yellow because you're worried about COVID and Tour de France being canceled. Sure, okay. I wouldn't worry about that, and I don't even think about that when I'm commentating because it's not a scenario I care about. But I do care about how much energy that race leader Tadej Pogacar and UAE team members are spending at this point in time, and it's a ton of energy. Tadej Pogacar's got great form. He goes to the line, puts a gap on everybody of 3 seconds except for Jonas Vingegaard, and rounding out the Tour de France first week here at stage 9 finishing. When it's all said and done, Jonas Vingegaard has never been dropped by Tadej Pogacar, but Pogacar has been dropped by the Jumbo-Visma squad on stage 4, and there has just been cluster moves done throughout this race from Jumbo-Visma that have cost their GC guys massive time here at the Tour de France. Now we're talking about 39 seconds to second place, Jonas Vingegaard. But if you do the math, if you look closely and analyze the race, I got to believe Jonas Vingegaard would be in the race leader's yellow jersey at this point in time if we had Wout van Aert not racing for the green jersey and riding the way Rowan Dennis would have ridden if he's in this race. And if that's the case, if he can't switch over to riding as a super domestique, get rid of Wout van Aert, bring in Rowan Dennis, and Rowan Dennis would have did it minus that stage 4 spectacular acceleration from Wout van Aert. But guess what? He didn't wait for Jonas Vingegaard anyway, so what difference does it make? I love the racing so far here at the Tour de France. The 9 stages has been spectacular. Remember, Wout van Aert is always welcome at the Tour de France on my team as a GC helper, a super domestique here when you're talking about bringing Primoz Roglic and Jonas Vingegaard here at the Tour de France. Because don't ever forget on stage 5 of that cobblestones, if you had Rowan Dennis and not Wout van Aert, Rowan Dennis would have looked after his GC guys. Primoz Roglic wouldn't have crashed. Jonas Vingegaard would have been back up with the GC guys after that bike exchange with Rowan Dennis dropping back and doing a spectacular job to bring him up to the front group. And right now, at this point in time, you gotta realistically be asking yourself, could Jonas Vingegaard be in yellow at this point in time? If not Jonas Vingegaard, Primoz Roglic, because you'd have 2 guys on the general classification for Jumbo-Visma. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to Beyond the Coverage because there's more stages coming here at the Tour de France. I'll see you guys on tomorrow's stage on the Butterfly Effect for stage 10 of the Tour de France.